Loud. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for, I think it's either the fourth or it's somewhere in the fourth to sixth. It's like that's my confidence interval for our epidemiologist friends. Tips in transitioning to the workforce. I'm really excited about this project and initiative we've been doing over this time. For those who don't know, I'm Zach Jenkins. I'm the director of applied practice for the Arnold School of Public Health. And we started this event as a way to share the lived experience and wisdom of our recent grads as they share their stories of what it's like finding a job and getting getting out there into the field because obviously that is the point of going to something like a Master of Public Health degree. And everybody's story is unique and different, and every year into a hiring cycle is different. And so, what we try to do is bring forth some of our most unique and high achieving students, or former students, I should say, alumni now, to share their journeys and highlight what that was like. So then, maybe as you are preparing to enter the workforce, you can gain some wisdom and ultimately some hope because while I think we can all agree that public health is kind of I would say under attack right now, and there's budget cuts and all those kind of things. It's not impossible to find work, and I would say that these the three individuals who we're going to be highlighting today are living proof that yes, you can find a job and still work in public health or a very public health adjacent field, and that this is a degree that is marketable for your career. So thank you so much all for being here. Very briefly, just going to give a couple of ground rules because we are recording this and we want to share this for our students who aren't able to attend tonight so they can view it in the future. So just the ground rules, just demonstrate respect for our speakers and the other attendees. Please keep your microphones off throughout the presentation unless you're asking a question. Feel free to drop questions into the chat virtually or raise your hand to ask a question. We're recording the webinar, so don't say anything or do anything crazy that you wouldn't want living in infamy, on the internet, I guess. So, anyways, so happy to be with all of you. So, without further ado, what I'm going to do now is have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And so I'll kind of call out to each of them, let them give a brief introduction, and then we'll get into more of the workforce component of that. So Ashanti, I see you first on our screen, so I'm going to call out to you. So why don't you give us your introduction?
Hi, my name is Ashanti. I graduated from the Health Promotion and Education Department at University of South Carolina. Been almost 2 years since I finished my program, and I am a grant specialist for pre-award at the University of Kentucky now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nuri.
Hi everyone, I'm Hassan. I do go by Nuri. I graduated from Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics with a background in or certification in maternal and child health. And I currently work as the Data and Evaluation Coordinator at McCormick Institute for Early Childhood Leadership, which is a part of National Louis University. So yeah.
Wonderful. And last but certainly not least, and I do want to give a shout out to Cate, especially just because I've known her for so long. I've known Cate since before COVID days, and so I teach an undergraduate public health class. So sometimes I'll get the undergrads to take the class with me and then go into the master's program. But before that, I taught a University 101 class, which is like an intro to college kind of course, but I've since retired from teaching that to focus on other teaching responsibilities. But Cate was in my U101 class back in the fall of 2019. So I met her then. Then she took my HPB 300 course. And then, and I'm actually wearing my Strictly Running jacket, she worked at Strictly Running in grad school as well and worked with the Arnold Childhood Obesity Initiative, which is something that I did in graduate school and then went to the master's program and graduated. So you didn't just hit the Holy Trinity. You hit something far beyond that. So I'm really excited to have you here, as all of you. But just knowing you so long, it's fun to see you on this side of it. So without further ado, Cate.
What a warm introduction, Zach. That's so kind. Yeah, talk about following in someone's footsteps. Zach is my man. But hi, everyone. My name is Kate Jones. I graduated back in May of 2025. It feels like a lifetime ago. But I graduated from the Department of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior. I currently work as a clinical trial project manager for a biotech startup. We're called Pure Health. I think my official title is probably a little bit misleading. I'm essentially like a project manager, and it's a biotech environment, so I kind of do all sorts of things. But yeah, that's my blurb.
Right on. And again, thanks all of you for being here. It's truly an honor to have you here. So, and I'll just open this up for the floor. Why don't you share your public health story about finding your current job? To tell us a little bit what that was like. Because it is a journey, as we know, finding employment.
I can go first, just so. Okay, yeah. Wow. Okay, my journey of finding employment started the January before I was graduating. So I started around 5 months before I was graduating. And full transparency, it was really hard. It was difficult. It was long. It was like demoralizing at times. This was right when the administration change was happening, so there was a lot of unknowns, I guess you could say. So it was pretty like emotionally exhausting. I remember going through like the hours I would spend in a day going through LinkedIn and like going through job descriptions. It was really, really tough. And at times it felt like it was never going to work out. Um, but I have found a job since then, so like there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think, which we'll get into probably later in the discussion, but there's definitely things I learned and things I would do differently if I had to do it again. Um, but kind of what Zach was talking about earlier in the panel, like things do work out the way they're supposed to, and like they seem really tough in the moment, but there's like a lesson in everything. And so I think just acknowledging that and persevering regardless of the circumstances is a really important skill that, I had to learn and that all of you will eventually learn in some capacity.
Thanks for that.
I can go next. Similar to Kate, I had the same situation. I also graduated in May 2025. So I started the job hunt around January, like right before. And again, just the transparency, I uprooted my life entirely from South Carolina all the way to Illinois. So it was kind of difficult in the sense that I didn't have networking. And a lot of times people would mention, like, oh, you should network more. It was quite difficult to do that. And so I would hear a lot of stories when I did meet through connections that a lot of people were being laid off during this crisis and they didn't have the funding for it. I would probably have applied for over 60 jobs. It was over LinkedIn, Indeed. I would go through their websites. So it was very disheartening too for me and I got the job quite literally late, and it's a different field too. But I would say public health was in like a difficult situation during that time. And I know a lot of people were going through a really difficult situation. And so I had to find or look for jobs outside of the public health scope in terms of like research analyst. And again, like at the end of the day, now that I look at it, it's like tinted colored glasses. Like it was not that bad, but it was quite difficult. But at the end of the day, like I learned a lot too, like through like resume, like building for each job and then going through the cover letters too. And I also learned like how like the companies themselves also use AI. So they actually can reject you within a matter of minutes of applying to a job. So those are some of the things that were definitely some of the ups and downs.
So I'll go next. So before I had finished my program, there were different opportunities that were presented, like in the listserv for students to volunteer. So I did volunteer as a grant reviewer for Holspire. And I did that for a couple of summers and really just getting an experience of just seeing like how different opportunities or just projects that nonprofits propose get funded. In the organization at the time I applied for, American Diabetes Association, they liked that I had the grant reviewing experience. Also highlighted different things that I did at Arnold School of Public Health with like qualitative research and whatnot. So my supervisor at the time there, like she loved just how I could like connect the program to the job and that I, had taken time to actually volunteer to do different experience like that. So I did get the position at the ADA, which is American Diabetes Association. And from there, University of Kentucky, they loved that I had worked with researchers at the ADA and that I had experience with like just budgeting, outlining like different requirements of like what is required in a grant proposal. So it all just kind of just expanded upon each other with just volunteering and work experience. Definitely was a very tough process because of the market, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, thanks all of you for sharing that. And so when you all were applying to these jobs, because you guys were truly in like, uh, probably the most dire situation of trying to find work, and we're still able to, which is incredible. And I think just a testament to all of your skills and capabilities. But when y'all were applying to those positions, were you mainly looking at like just LinkedIn or other websites, or what was your process? Did you like daily, weekly? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I know for me, probably 90% of the jobs I was looking for and applying for came from LinkedIn. I know there's the Google spreadsheet of public health jobs that's circling somewhere in the public health sphere. That kind of came in later to my job application process, but it was super, super helpful. I remember like I would just plug into Google too, like public health positions, I was interested in programming at the time, so you can kind of like try different keywords and just seeing what comes up. LinkedIn, not in the way that like they have that jobs tabs, but if you actually go through like your feed, you can, it's like a more, I feel like human approach to jobs, and like you see people looking for jobs, you see people, um, posting jobs as a post and not like as a job. So you really have to get creative with it, and that was the way I did it. I don't know if that was the most efficient way to do it. I ended up finding my current position through networking, so kind of all that was like null and void to a certain extent. But yeah, I think you have to get creative and you just have to open doors you didn't think to open.
Yes, I would say I looked on LinkedIn, Indeed. There are like certain groups for people studying public health. I'm a member of Black Ladies in Public Health. There's also Public Health Hired. They do post jobs. I would say for that are related to our field. I would say for LinkedIn, a tip that I learned because not all jobs do go through that like jobs feature on LinkedIn for the posting because apparently people have to pay just to post it on that site. So a good tip is like if you know kind of like a position that you want to apply for, let's say like data analysis, if epidemiology is your thing, then type in data analysis and South Carolina and like people who are like looking for that kind of position, you'll see like all the postings from like different recruiters or employees at a company looking for that job. So that's also really helpful as well in finding positions.
So for me, I was looking at LinkedIn and Indeed, and the job that I applied for and I currently work in opened up like exactly a week or 3 weeks ago. I was probably obsessively online trying to look for jobs, and I did it through like I put down SPSS coordinator, SAS analyst, data analyst, any and every kind of job. I also opened the door for my undergraduate degree in like with health informatics. So the job that I do right now is related to Python, auto-generating reports, and working in education. So at first I was kind of disheartened, like not finding public health related jobs that I have actually done a lot of the SAS work for. But my graduate assistantship at Student of Health and Wellbeing at University of South Carolina did help me a lot with my SPSS coding. So I actually wrote down SPSS coordinator. So that's what came up on my feed. So anything related to skills, it sometimes comes up on Indeed, but I actually applied it again through the websites. So that has been like a very helpful way to get that through. But listservs have been helpful too for others.
So something I want to make a through line is that through Ashanti's experience and Nuri's experience, those experiences ended up feeding into your careers because your Master of Public Health is so much about what you do. And so there's ways to make those things transferable, which actually is going to lead into my next question, but I do want to share a funny story with all of you. Once upon a time when I graduated and was applying for jobs, I remember the first day I went to look, I went on Indeed and I think I typed in something like public health jobs or something very basic. And the very first thing that came up, I think it might have been an ad or something, but it was still like coming up in the search, was for a Domino's delivery, pizza delivery. And I was like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? But obviously, that was back before I was Dr. Jenkins and all that, so it all ended up working out. So, anyways, that point does lead into my first question that we had submitted, which is, how does one understand and communicate your transferable skills that you develop in the MPH program to these jobs that may be slightly outside of the traditional realm of public health?
I think I can go first. So majority of the times, the way I have communicated my transferable skills was through writing the objective based on what the job description has stated and applied it based on whatever they had in their job description with the wording in the resume. And also in the cover letter, I had stated like I am from a public health field. However, these are how some of the ways that I have applied those skills. For example, even with Python project, I've done that when I was an undergrad. How did I apply it? Similarly, how I've used SPSS, even though I don't have other experiences, I will type it out that I have used something similar. For example, we've used REDCap in our clinical protocols development class, but I said like, I used REDCap and I've also used Anthology in my grad assistantship. So it was easy for me to say, hey, like I know you guys use Alchemer, but I can learn it eventually. So those are some of the things, like these are some of the things that we've used that will be helpful. Working with large data sets, especially with SPSS and SAS, was quite difficult during my undergrad and my grad schools for sure. So those are some of the things like I mentioned, like at USC, like I used it, and so I know how to manage data moving forward.
I can go next. What a big question. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is obviously what you learn throughout your MPH content wise is really important. Like we all want to work in public health, right? Like that's the goal. That's why you're getting an MPH. I work in I would say like a health adjacent environment. So on the daily, I wouldn't say I'm relying on the content I learned on a daily basis. I think what I rely on is the skills you develop through it. So take like a team project, for example. How do you work in a team? How do you manage your team members? How do you make and communicate timelines? How do you present deliverables? You know, how do you speak to leadership and then colleagues? So I think kind of the behind the scenes stuff is just as important as the content you learn in your MPH, but I think a lot of times it gets overlooked. And so for me, being in a health adjacent setting, I think that understanding the skills that come through, like, yeah, like I said, like behind the scenes of your MPH, and then communicating that to your employer or through job applications, I think that's just as important. Because, all of us have MPHs. I think it's what you do with it and how you can tell them like that's what's going to make you stand out. So I think just communicating that is really important. I found that to be really important, and that's something that I do on the daily, which I think probably everyone here on the panel can agree. Like it's more than the content; it's kind of the operations behind it as well.
Yes, I would say I like for any projects that I did through the MPH program, I'm just thinking about like what skills that I gained when I completed the class and any work that we had. So qualitative skills from the 724 class or grant writing skills and building a budget, program evaluation. So really thinking about like what was like the objectives of what we learned. And then for jobs that require that, I have those like on hand to like present to the employer in a portfolio. So for this job, a key uh, responsibility that I have is building budgets for researchers. So like the content that I had from 735, another important thing, make sure that you do your best work because especially if you're showing this to an employer who wanted to reflect like, good quality work, like you want to get hired here. So I had that on hand and it like directly related to the jobs that they was requiring us to do. So just thinking about what did I learn from doing these different projects and having those on hand to present to the employer is really good for communicating your skills and it'll definitely just impress them and remember you as a candidate because a lot of people they don't have this digital portfolio, they're not showing their work. So when you can like communicate that and actually show them, they'll definitely be impressed.
Such high level answers from all of you. And yeah, I think we're training you to be public health practitioners through the curriculum, and we have those public health core competencies. But those things really are applicable to other fields. Learning about evaluation, reporting on key performance indicators. If you're talking about the business world, project management, public health or leadership, working on teams. I mean, those are all things that regardless of your exact field. If you're going to work with other people, that's basically going to be a necessity. So thank you all for sharing all that. So once you got through all of the applying for jobs and you finally had that magical moment where they either emailed you or called you and they're finally making an offer, tell me about that. And so when that happened, did you all negotiate your salary or what was your approach for that?
I can go first. I think are you like talking about like the job interview process as a whole or just specifically salary negotiations, Zach?
I guess I am interested in knowing if you all negotiated salary. So let's answer that one first, and then I do want to know about what were the types of questions they asked, but we can tackle the salary question first.
Perfect. So I did not negotiate my salary. I was in a position where I was like, I felt really grateful to just have a job. And full transparency, um, the salary that they proposed to me was much higher than my expectations. So I felt completely satisfied with what I was receiving. And it kind of goes back to where like, you feel like it feels so desperate. Like you feel desperate for a job, and so you don't want to like I understand the feeling of not wanting to like push back on something in the off chance that it goes away. So I think this is kind of a unique situation just because of the time that we're in. But I personally did negotiate my salary. Now that like I have a job and I have a better idea of what my skills are, I definitely feel more comfortable negotiating in the future. And I feel more comfortable. I think I have a better idea of how to go about that process, but for my first job, I did not.
I did not negotiate my salary either. I got the salary that I requested. Looking back, I probably would have gone up more because of the type of just job environment. It can get really stressful on pre-award side with just deadlines and then working with different departments. For any tips for that, if you are early career, then it is kind of tough because you kind of need the experience to have more leverage. But if it is something where like they require you to work like in SaaS, then you have that from this program, or like community-based organizations. If you have volunteering experience, then just see what room there is to go higher. And if they don't budge, then look at taking the position to use it as a stepping stone to get a higher salary down the line, or take that experience to another company that is going to pay you more.
So prior to starting even getting into the interview, I actually was given a range that was kind of on the lower side than what they were presenting online. So after I got selected, I actually negotiated with them to get the higher end of that range. But it's still, I don't feel like living in Illinois or living around Chicago, it's like always feasible. But at the same time, just like Cate said and Ashanti said, like this is a field that's currently like, it's your first job, so you don't want to negotiate for more all the time. But now, like, I can see myself negotiating more in the future for other positions. But as a first time person, it's kind of like daunting to do that. So I did negotiate, but I feel like I could have negotiated for more.
And thank you all for sharing those vulnerable moments. And I will say, I hope that all of our soon-to-be or future grads, I hope you do negotiate for salary. And I would love to help support you with that. And because I felt very similarly, and I did not negotiate for salary because I had a number in my mind that I felt was fair. When I was offered that, I was happy. But really, what I've kind of learned over time is that, the work is the work and business is business. And so, they're not going to retract a position offer from you because you're requesting a salary raise. In fact, this is your time where the ball is in your court. So just something to think about. And so if they can't, they can't, but they're not going to be like, you want a 5% more? We're going to go with candidate B, actually. It doesn't really work like that. Especially when there's HR involved and all those kind of things. And half the time they're the ones who are approving it or not, and the supervisor maybe support it. So there's a whole bunch to it, but just wanted to kind of say that piece. But thank you all for sharing that. So moving back slightly, so tell us about what types of questions did they ask in the interview process? Were the questions fairly standard, or were there questions that stood out to you that you were like, "Whoa, I was not expecting that," or questions maybe you feel like you answered well that set you apart from others?
I know for me, I feel like a lot of my interviews I blocked out because it was so stressful. But it shouldn't be like that. But I know one of the questions I really struggled with, it's the first question they ask you when they ask you to tell you about yourself. It like seems like misleading, like it's like an easy question, but I think being on the other side of it and like going through applications and sitting in on interviews, there's a little bit more to it. You kind of have to have a pitch for yourself. You want to make I like 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds of your spiel talking about, who you are, your background, why you're interested in the role, and what kind of led you to that. You want to like tell a story all within like a minute, 90 seconds. And I know for me, I like to ramble, so I found that difficult. And so I think that was one of the parts I struggled with the most. Um, but again, my current position, it was a little bit unique. It didn't follow like a formal job interview, um, like other ones I'd had in the past. But I feel like tell me about yourself is you're gonna get that no matter where you end up. So I think my advice is really kind of work on that and make it really eloquent and make it impactful. And I think that's gonna make a really good first impression when you're talking to like a hiring committee.
I think I can go. So when I first started, I would say, tell me about yourself is definitely very difficult to explain. And I said something along the lines like, I love data, but I love data to tell a story. So that is something I know for a fact they love and they ate that up. A lot of the questions related were, this is a field like where I work is in early childhood education. So a lot of the questions were standard, but at the same time, they did ask me about like what were my programming skills and what to what extent I knew about it. But a lot of it was questions that they asked was about what did I know, specifically Illinois related questions. That do I know the credentialing? Because we work with EC, like early childhood education directors credentialing. So how much or to what extent did I know about it? And I know that is a question that definitely tripped me up because I didn't know that much other than the fact that they did those. So I felt like at that moment, it was to ease myself up to say like they were just trying to see which scope, like how much do I know and how much could they train me? So then I pivoted back and said like, it's similar to public health. So I was able to actually say like, I can learn this. So that is something that I have definitely struggled with during my interviews and for sure, like when it comes to time management and having different leadership academies around the entire country, how would you manage those deadlines and generate reports for them in time? So how would you deal with it? And so I was kind of honest and transparent, like you have to set boundaries at the same time. Like, yes, you will be working with it and then talk to your supervisor. And then how could you delegate those times? Like, hey, I won't be able to make it. Or this won't be done on time due to other deadlines. So those are some of the things I think that they respected for sure. And be honest during the interviews for sure.
Yeah, the tell me about yourself question does definitely come up pretty often. I think that's in all the interviews that I've had. Um, and also there was a question like, tell me, like what is a difficult skill that you had to learn? So that could open up like some vulnerability there because like if I tell this, then is that going to make me like be out of the running for the job? I don't know how the employer's going to view that. But I just always try to turn like a negative into a positive. So like for me, it's difficult for me to really like delegate tasks. I know like if I'll do it, then I'll get it done. I'll get it done timely. And so that can be difficult. Hey, like, can you, please, work on this for me so I can get this project moving. And that pretty much was my difficult trait was delegating tasks. But I did let them know also to that point that it's about teamwork at the end of the day. And if we want to get this done in a timely manner, then we gotta, work together so we can succeed.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think that, that tell me about yourself question, even when before you're doing job interviews, really as a student, you kind of get asked it often to introduce yourself to others, to faculty members. So you almost need to have your kind of like your spiel, your shtick, and you're trying to figure out your identity, your career identity, your academic identity through those conversations. But having at least some type of go-to is definitely good practice. And I do just want to say that one of the things that makes our school really unique is, to my knowledge, we are the only ones who do this, although I've not done a thorough investigation. But we started an initiative in the past 2 years where we call it the MPH mock application resource. And so basically you can submit jobs that you're interested in applying for. And me and Brittany and several of our other colleagues will collaborate and we basically do a mock interview based on the job that you want. So a real job that's out there, and we try to think about what are the types of questions that they will ask to help prepare you. I know once upon a time, I don't think I'm making this up. Cate did that for a graduate or a paid practicum opportunity, and she was given that position after practicing. And I believe she said it helped. I think I have the email somewhere. But anyways, so that's something that you can take advantage of as students. And another a small aside is that I'm really invested and interested in your as incoming students, as current students, in your well-being moving forward. So I will meet with you every day once you graduate if I have to. I don't, that might be too much, excessive. In fact, some of your colleagues, I have one in mind in particular. I was like, I've got to get this guy a job because I'm about to lose my mind if he comes to this office one more time. But fortunately, he does have a job now, and so I'll let you all figure out who that is. But anyways, so just know that that's something that we're here to support you with. So moving on to our next question here. So anything you would have done differently about the job search process if you could do it over again?
I know for me, my approach when I first started applying was like just throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks. So I probably applied to over 100 jobs throughout my process. So I was kind of just applying to apply to jobs. I thought it was like a numbers game, which I think to some extent it is. But if I could have done it over again, I think I just would have been a lot more intentional with the jobs I was applying for. I think finding job descriptions in positions that really align with your background, your experience, and where you want to go. There's going to be less of them, obviously, but I think that gives you the time and the bandwidth to really tailor your application and make it super aligned with the job description I think that increases your likelihood of hearing back for an interview for that position rather than applying to 20 jobs in a week where it's kind of aligned, but it's kind of not. So I think being really intentional and dedicating the time to having quality applications instead of, I think quality over quantity in this circumstance. But it feels like counterintuitive because it's like you want to apply to as many jobs as you can so that you have the highest chance of hearing back. But I think it's actually like the opposite, where it's like if you spend the time and make a quality application, you're gonna be better in the long haul doing that.
Using dating as an analogy, you go on a lot of dates with a lot of different people, but probably if you invest some more time into it, you probably get something more out of it.
Um, I don't think there is too much more I could have did in terms of applying for jobs, because I pretty much, yeah, was sending out a lot of applications as well. Um, but I would say probably as a tip, if you feel like there are over like 100, other applications for the same position, then doing a cover letter for that job, because there are a lot of people who do not attempt to write, something like that, just because it takes extra time. You got to tailor it for each job and whatnot. And then, the job description is like your cheat code and like using those different characteristics in your cover letter, but I would definitely recommend that. Again, like a lot of people are not including that with applying for the job, and it'll definitely, I think when I did include that, I did at least get some feedback from the recruiter that I had impressive skills, uh, and that, they would keep a lookout.
This is kind of a difficult question for me because I feel like I don't know what I do. A little that would be a little bit different because I feel like again, like everyone said, definitely good quality and intentionality should be behind every application that should go into it. But at this time, it was a kind of a scary moment because you don't know like where your life is going to take you. You kind of need a job. So those are some of the things, and I feel like having to network would have been a great opportunity for me to get to know the people that are here in Illinois. So if there are any sort of like public health conferences, I feel like I should have gone to them or any type of a convention that would have taken place because I feel like that networking or getting to know someone and getting to hear from them would have been a little bit more helpful in finding the job process a little bit more smoother or just to learn about how things are like here. So.
Yeah, the public health world is small. It's really small in South Carolina, but it's small, and so you go to these conferences and you see the same people over and over again. And coming off the heels of South Carolina Public Health Association, cannot vouch for that concept enough. So we're getting down to our last couple of questions here. But what is one class that you wish you would have paid more attention to during your program to prepare you for your current role?
I can go first. I think secondary data analysis Intermediate biostatistics. I wish I did not goof around like and actually locked in during the classes because um those are some of the things that come up very frequently at my job and because I'm like the only person that is doing it I have to refer back to my notes. I still use my quantitative methods analysis class notes all the time and I am always looking at which one like should I be doing longitudinal studies or which one will be better. All those things are applicable in every field. So even if you're working with statistics in early education, if you're working in public health, if you're working in somewhere else, like it's the same thing. So I wish I focused on it a little bit more and not just refer back to the books all the time. But that is something for sure. And I think I wish that I took the R programming class too. That would have been very helpful. But other things like our leadership classes that we've taken, those have been very helpful in developing my soft skills for sure.
I definitely agree with what Nuri said. I think quantitative, which is a bummer because I really did not like that class, to be honest, but you'll see that everywhere. You see it, I would say like probably 80% to 90% of the job descriptions that you're going to be reading through require some data analysis skills. Um, so I think that class is definitely super valuable. I know in our program evaluation class, I had Dr. Larson at the time, and she actually taught us some R on the side, which was so valuable. And I don't do a whole lot of data analysis in my current job, but you know, just having learned that in general is so important because you can leverage it on your resume and in your application, and it just makes you a really strong candidate because piggybacking off what Nuri said, like it comes up in, any position that you do, like whether it's like programming or evaluation, like it truly, everyone uses it. So it's an important skill to have.
I believe it's the program planning class, which is 7:35, is highly relevant for my job. I had Dr. Wamaris, so I definitely was paying attention in there because she can give a lot of work, but she's definitely very much valuable and just enriching as a professor with the things that we learned in that class because it's very much a real life experience what I do now. Maybe other classes that I would have taken, maternal and child health, probably focus more on health communication as well. Again, like the communication, things like data analysis, you pretty much that's across the board with a lot of public health positions that they want you to have those skills. And if you were looking like policy routes, I believe that was I know we had a class, I can't think of the exact name for it. But those are pretty high demand skills now as well in the job search of public health.
Great points all around. Just a reminder to folks, if any of you have questions, please put them in the chat, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get to those if anything's come up to any of you. So feel free to put them in there, and I'll pull them if anybody has any. But what y'all tell me? Speaking of your current roles, what is the most rewarding and challenging part of the work that you do now?
I think my answer is probably, I think I have one answer for both of those. I'm in a startup environment, so it's really rewarding to see, like a project start from from absolute zero. And being an employee, you kind of get say in how a company is built out or how frameworks are established, which is really rewarding and it's just really cool to see. Um, it's also kind of also the most challenging part. There's a lot of unpredictability and you're starting from scratch. So you're instead of following protocols, you're making protocols, which for me, I feel like I love structure. Um, I'm really good with process. So you tell me a process, I can follow it beautifully. I think for me, the hardest part is just, getting creative and getting innovative and building it from the ground up. So kind of pros and cons. in my current position.
Currently with my role, I would say most difficult is just working across multiple departments because I'm a grant specialist for public health faculty, as well as biochemistry and then health sciences. So I have about three different departments. It can get overwhelming just making sure that like the documents that they're sending me are filed under the correct name, the correct department. But over time it does get better. They kept telling me like after your first year, you will, things will just be so much more familiar. So that can just get a bit difficult, which is balance. But I just pay close attention to detail with what I am saving and whatnot. But most rewarding, I would say, is just like the relationships that I'm building with the researchers there. They know my name. They let me know if they are about to apply for a grant or like if something is moving forward in the process, let's say with NIH, and they want them to submit additional materials, then they know to send it to me because I'll get it to the right person. So I love like the relationships that we're building and just hearing about like work um, that they want to propose in their project. And it's definitely first year is hard, going in the workforce, but after the first year, it does get better.
For me, it's I think been more than 6 months, but it's a different field. So obviously, learning new things has been very rewarding, and seeing them how it's very similar, and like applying also maternal and child health things that I've learned during classes. So those are some of the things that I have found very rewarding, and getting to work with data and like being able to work on research notes and working on publications have been some of the most rewarding things ever. But I will say some of the challenges, I do miss the public health field and working with community members, and feeling like that sense of, I feel like I'm making an impactful decisions, and being able to make sure that people are guided towards the right decision, because majority of my grad assistant work was working with students and getting to see like the impacts that I've made throughout the entire process, not just working with data, but it was like more than that in the interaction and having to get to know them if they've made any changes. And so watching that visible impact is kind of different than it is what I'm doing now. Now it's more of the data collection and seeing like behind the scenes work. So I feel like that has been a challenge because it is kind of isolating.
Thank you all. We do have a question here from Francis. So, did you have mentors and did they help you with your job search?
Yeah, I definitely had my mentors from my MCH department. I had Dr. Perimal. I also had um, Carlos, who was my mentor for the maternal child health practicum that I've worked in. And they have been a supportive background and pillars in helping me out. And so has been other professors. I think Dr. Zhang helped me out a lot with any type of biostatistics questions that I've had. So they were, and obviously Zach has been a very essential part of our entire career and like classes. So the MPH journey and having Dr. Tours and everybody, they have been great mentors throughout the process.
Um, yeah, Zach, he like I don't y'all don't understand how much of a tool he is. So please, 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 if you take anything away from this, use him and take advantage of the resources that him and Brittany provide. He's a huge mentor that I've had over the past 6, 7 years since meeting him freshman year. Um, I think also a lot of my professors, Dr. Larson was a big one, Dr. Billings was a big one. Also in my lab, the other grad students there were super big. All the PhD students, they kind of have like a different angle from things. They're in academia and they have a very kind of set plan, or timeline, but a lot of them were a lot older than me and able to give good advice because they're a couple years older than me, but they weren't so far like in their careers where they couldn't relate to me entering the job workforce.
I would definitely say Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Kennison were great mentors for me coming out the program. Dr. Kennison had a lot of different connections when I was just trying, which I'm still on the side when I have time, but looking into different organizations to get like more experience with policy advocacy. She knew like, hey, like, reach out to League of Women Voters, or here's a connection if you want to do more work with Holzfire. So she was definitely great at just really gaining more experience in those areas. And Dr. Ramirez as well, just like communication of what kind of impact I could make with my skills.
And just a full disclaimer, I did not tell them to say that I was actually helpful or a good mentor. Although maybe I should start doing that as since I'm facilitating these things. So I can put that in my annual review or something. But no, thanks all for sharing that. So we're obviously still, while maybe in a slightly improved state from this time last year, as far as like grants and all that kind of stuff in the field of public health, I would say that we're still in the fight for good. And so sometimes that can feel daunting and overwhelming. So we want to leave things, and also applying for jobs and trying to find that first job can feel similarly. So we want to end things on a hopeful note. One of my favorite movies is Rogue One. And a quote from that is, well, rebellions are built on hope. And so why don't you share, have each of our panelists share your words of wisdom and hope for students as they either start their academic journeys or start to enter the workforce. Um, or as they enter their career. So what final words of wisdom and hope do you have for all of us?
I would say just words of wisdom that you are in an awesome program and you are learning great skills that are transferable to the real world, like me and the other panelists have said. No experience is too small. So anything that you have done with volunteering, any kind of projects that you've done at the School of Public Health, definitely take that on the job as it relates and just let them know. And you don't know unless you try. So just put your best foot forward. And each chance you're getting one step closer to your goal.
I have so many words of wisdom. I think one, think outside the box. Don't be afraid to get creative. Where you start necessarily isn't indicative of where you will end up eventually. Someone told that to me while I was on a job search, and I found it really valuable because I think a lot of times we have expectations that we're going to find our dream job right after graduation, which sometimes that's the case. I would argue more often times than not, it's not the case, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that there's something to be learned in that position that you can then leverage to get closer to your dream job. And then also, this process can feel so overwhelming. And even when you're in a job, it can feel overwhelming. In school, it can feel overwhelming. So I think just like make sure that it doesn't like steal your joy. I think a lot of times it can get really demoralizing and just like know that you're a person outside of this, take care of yourself and regardless of your job status, like you are valued, you bring like you're worthy and just like always keep that in mind because no matter whether you're a student or you're on the job search or you have a job, you're a person first.
I don't know if I can follow up after that. The majority of the times I would say mainly is like take advantage of the resources and additional courses that MPH program at USC provides. There are so many, and go to the conferences if you can. These are the only times you can get to do that and without any worries. And even if you don't like the courses, just take them just for fun and get to apply them in the future. And also, if you don't know about something, that's okay because a lot of times in the job you're going to learn. So those have been some things that I feel like at first like it could be intimidating, but once I got the hang of it and got in it, I feel like I learned more on the job. Even if you feel like you haven't applied it in classes, that's totally fine. You will definitely apply them later.
Man, maybe what we need to do is start having like a series like Wisdom Wednesday, and I'll start asking like questions from all of you to share, and then I can share those with all of our current and prospective students. Thank all of you so much for spending a great evening with great dialogue and great conversations. And I just want to close it by saying I'm so humbled to know all of you, and I'm so proud of all of you. It's just amazing to me. I really can't put it into words how moving it is to see you all come into the programs, get involved in things, and then go out there in the field and in three very different fields all over the country doing amazing work. I mean, it truly is moving to me. So I feel very fortunate to know all of you and thank all of you for spending this time together. Please go forward, remain hopeful, and as always, if there is anything that any of you ever need from me or Brittany, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here for you. We care about you, and we're all in this together. So go forth and enjoy the rest of your Wisdom Wednesday. And I think we'll talk again soon. So thank all of you.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.